What's good, gamers? Akalon here. Welcome back to each and every one of you. We have an interview here with Anne Stickney and Catherine Bankson, lead narrative designers for World of Warcraft. One of them, at least, is the lead, one of the lead narrative designers. We're going to go through a lot of their questions, their answers. Some of them weren't too bad, some of them pretty bad. The last one was actually the one that started up the most amount of, let's say, drama on Twitter and on the forums. People are very unhappy. That includes Noble. Me and him had a bit of a back and forth on Twitter, or X, about this specific portion of the interview. So there's some interesting stuff here. So stick around to the end, because you really don't want to miss the final question. That I would say is the most charged. But anyways, we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about some of their answers, how they view the story, and then how the story hits for us, the player base. Those of you that don't know, I've had good and bad things to say about the Dragonflight stories. Overall, I think the stories are good. I don't think they're bad. I think the stories end badly. Like, the stories have this very nice build-up, and a lot more build-up than what we've really seen in the past. But then, sort of all of the stories miss the landing. They just don't stick the landing. A great example of this is Nosdormu's storyline. Literally, from the first minute of Dragonflight, there's this foreshadowing. You know, Murazond, the time, the bronze dragons, things are weird. And then, you know, comes the great finale, the thing that we should all go, oh, and that's not there. You know, turns out he again doesn't turn into Murazond, and again he is saved. Never mind the fact that this opens a lot of contingency problems, because we're consistently told that you cannot change the timeline, that you should not interfere with the timeline, that the timeline should be allowed to play out the way that it plays out, and that's the whole point of the Bronze Dragons. But then, when the timeline seems to show that Murazond should be created, the Bronze Dragons can interfere as much as they want, and nothing happens. There's no real side effects to their interference in the timeline, regardless of anything. So it's sort of weird. It creates a lot of weird, I would say, balance issues within the story. What can be trusted, what can't be trusted, and that really goes into the last one. But all right, without further ado, let's just jump into it, shall we? So their first question is, how did Alex Straza figure out Farak was coming for a Myrdrasil? And their answer here really isn't, it doesn't make as much sense, I think, as they think it makes sense. Because they sort of reference the cinematic right after, you know, we save Nosdormu, and Nosdormu telling Alex Straza that he sees only fiery clouds. And then they say Alex Straza sort of put all of the elements together, and she was like, well, clearly that means Farak's going for the tree. Like, I mean, the logic there does not hold. Fiery clouds, that could literally just be Farak burning everything. Like, how do you get from fiery clouds to the burning of the tree, right? That's a bit of an issue. That I think, again, the reason I'm highlighting this question is it sort of goes to the heart of a lot of the story problems in World of Warcraft proper, not just in Dragonflight. There seems to sometimes in World of Warcraft be almost this sort of skipping over steps in order to get to the next big platform. So we want to go from platform A to platform C, and we're just going to skip B, right? Or we're just going to sort of kind of explain and then move on. This leaves the players with a lot of questions. Like, how the hell did we get here? A great example of this is Vyranoth. Vyranoth has a conversation with Farak, where Farak basically once again reveals that he's absolutely nuts. And Vyranoth goes from her last conversation with Alex Straza, basically saying that everything goes, this is war, I'm not the same Vyranoth as I have always been, screw you, to right after that conversation making her way to Valdrakken and then becoming an ally of Alex Straza. Now, I would have bought if Vyranoth went to warn Alex Straza because all she was trying to do was stop Farak from destroying the tree, because that's not their goal. That I probably wouldn't have had too much of a problem with, even though still her allying with Alex Straza, considering their final conversation, doesn't make a lot of sense. But then to just turn around and be like, oh yeah, we're best buddies again, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, there's no explanation for this. There's no exposition for this. It wasn't explained to the player base how Veranoth reached that point. It was just sort of done, and the player base were just accepted. We just had to accept, yeah, okay, this is what happens. I don't like it. It just comes across as lazy writing, because you're leaving certain elements on the floor, and you're leaving the player base to have to guess as to what those elements actually entail. And that's not good storytelling. I should never have to guess why certain things happened. I may not know why certain things happen, or why those things have, impact, or what that impact will be, but I should not guess as to the validity of the thing that happened. I think that's what I should say. If something happens, and it is so unbelievable that I'm going, that does make sense, that's bad writing. Because that means that you created a scenario that was so unbelievable to the player that the player simply cannot buy into it. Now, you can absolutely create your own headcanon around it. You can say, oh, she realized this, and that's why she decided to do this and this and this. It has to be shown. For it to be believable, it needs to be shown. I need to see how her thought patterns change. I need to see how she gets from her final conversation with Alex Straza to best buddies again. Or I need to see the mistrust that she still has for Alex Straza, but, there's a lot of things wrong with that storyline. But anyways, next question, they asked about blue-eyed blood elves as well as Minari paladins, and they specifically asked whether or not this is a mistake. And Blizzard confirmed that no, this is absolutely canonical. Elves now have blue eyes, and they keep speaking about Minari paladins, by the way, saying that if a Minari paladin were to be introduced, that would absolutely be on purpose. I know that there were a few people on Twitter that were not happy with that. To you, I will say, deal with it. I have explained in the past how the different elements operate and how the different cosmological forces operate in terms of magic. It makes sense that a Minari paladin could, in fact, join the light or serve the light. It would be difficult. The Minari paladin would have to jump through a bunch of hoops because the light offers its power. It's not the same as Foul, where it's just available to anyone that wants to pursue it because the Foul wants to infect them. The light offers their power to those that they deem worthy. So there would need to be at least some storyline behind how a Minari paladin came to be, but they do make reference to Lord Thraxian, a literal Nathrazim that joined the Army of the Light, showing that it is possible for literally anything or anyone to join the Army of the Light, to become part of the Light. So, yeah, for those of you that may have had some problems with some of those storylines, just know that Minari Paladin probably going to become a thing. They then asked them a number of questions about the evolving narrative and how Cataclysm and Dragonflight appear to be very similar. To this, they simply said the Druids of the Flame made more sense. One thing that I did take issue with, I don't mind that at all. The Druids of the Flame does make sense. We should have had the Druids of the Flame before. They're an interesting faction within World of Warcraft, and their history and sort of relationship with the Night Elves and proper is a very interesting one. So I don't mind that the Druids of the Flames are back at all. I do find one issue with what they said here, and that is that the Primalists are sort of no longer the threat that they were at the beginning. They're no longer really an invasionary force, because we've mostly dealt with the Primalists. And to that, I would say, when and how? When exactly did we deal with the Primalist force? The Primalists have been around, but they've really been relegated to a very minor incursion force. We haven't really seen them in their glory. It's been far more about the Incarnates and the Incarnate storylines. I think more could have been done with the Primalists. I think a lot more could have been done with the Primalists, but, ultimately for Blizzard, the Primalists can't really get into the Dream. Farak needed someone that could get him into the Dream, and that's why the Druids of the Flame is there. The Primalists are more shamanistic, so they would not have access to the Dream, at least not in that way. Then they asked a very interesting question. They asked about the Dragon Isles. And the specific question here, I think, I'm going to read this to you because I think it matters, the specific question and the phrasing of it. I have the feeling that there are serious context issues in the initiation of certain expansions. For example, the context of the awakening of the Dragon Islands is non-existent in-game, even though Steve Denuza revealed it to me during a previous interview. Is this a voluntary narrative process? Their answer here, by the way, it completely doesn't answer the question. It's like they literally almost on purpose ignored the question, because they go on to say that how they showed how the Dragon Isles are awakening during the pre-patch, and they also showed how the Dragon Isles were awakening when we first arrived, and we need to know that the Dragon Isles, continue to wake up. The Dragon Isles aren't really fully awake even yet. It continues to wake up as we walk the land, and they think they've shown that perfectly. But I took the question very differently. Maybe I'm wrong here, but the way I took this question, and there might be some bias here, the context behind it, why the hell is the Dragon Isles awakening now? That's never been explained. No explanations. We were told by Steve Denuza, oh, Azeroth started to heal. And, I pointed out at the time that answer makes no sense, because after the Cataclysm, the second Sundering, after the Great Sundering, Azeroth had 10,000 plus years to heal, and she didn't heal. The Dragon Isles were closed, and the Dragon Isles did not reopen. And then Azeroth 6 years ago, 11 years now with WoW's 5 years time skip, 11 years later, after being stabbed by a literal planet killer, and then also being blasted with domination magic just 5 years ago by the jailer, she's now healed enough for the Dragon Isles to awaken. What? How could she not heal after the Sundering? 10,000 plus years, but she could heal in just 11 years from being stabbed and also blasted with domination magic. I think that's the context that was really asked about here. We want to know how it healed, because Noble brought this up on Twitter, I think a week ago or so. He brought up this point, and I responded to him in exactly the same way I am now. I don't know. There's no information in the game. What I could think, and what I do think, is that the stabbing may have weakened the elements, or the elemental prisons of Azeroth, and this allowed the elemental lords and the elemental forces to break free, and that is actually what has empowered the Dragon Isles. That's why the Dragon Isles are awakening. So it has nothing to do with Azeroth healing or not healing. It has literally to do with the elemental prisons. And, that could definitely make sense. Again, it's not really explained in the game, so, take your best guess. Who knows, right? I don't. Then we have more questions about the alliance between the Primalists and the Druids of the Flame. It basically just goes through the same thing. They're no longer a force to be reckoned with, and the Druids of the Flame just makes more sense here. They then ask a question. Humor offers breaks in the narrative, and they specifically ask, why are there so many quests that sort of break away from the seriousness and just sort of become silly, if you will? I, by the way, actually love those quests. I understand, and Blizzard says this as well, you need a bit of a break from the serious. If you just have everything be serious, the serious eventually becomes bland and boring, and people no longer find the serious serious. So the humor offers very interesting breaks. What I then take issue with is that the serious have not felt serious in World of Warcraft for a really long time. Shadowlands definitely didn't do a good job of making that better, especially since death now no longer matter, because you can literally just go to the Shadowlands and see your loved ones. They're there, they're there. It's fine. You don't have to worry about it. It's just a different place, but it's the same thing. So it's been a while since big moments in World of Warcraft have really felt like big moments. And I think one of the problems I have, and this is not part of the question, they didn't ask this, I'm giving you guys my thoughts here. The problem I have with this entire thing is that more often than not in World of Warcraft, the conclusion is sort of obvious. We know what the conclusion is going to be based on how every single conclusion always plays out. There's going to be some kind of victory, and then we're on to the next threat. We never lose. There are no stakes in the losses anyways. You know, if Farak manages to destroy a Mirdrasil, what does it matter? We've never seen the tree. No one gives a shit about the tree. Most Night Elves don't want the tree as their new home. They would like Teldrassil back. So at the end of the day, if Farak succeeds here, so what? It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter to the player base. We already know that Farak will not succeed. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. We never lose in World of Warcraft, ever. So it doesn't matter how much humor you write into it in order to offer a break because you're trying to build up the seriousness. I cannot be seriously entertained by a story if I know for a fact that I will never lose in this story. And that, I think, is something that Blizzard will have to, at some point, address. It is getting boring. They asked about Tyr and his purpose in Dragonflight. To this, the only part of their answer that I found really interesting, it's not bad. It wasn't a bad answer. It's just there was one part that was super interesting. And that is that Vyranoth may have a lot of questions for Tyr, and they're interested to know if Tyr will actually have the answers for some of the questions that Vyranoth may be posing, and that may actually start to signal the first break between the dragon aspect and their loyalty to the Titans, and maybe their loyalty instead being towards Azeroth rather than towards the Titans. The final question, however, was the one that created the most amount of outrage on Twitter. People are very, very angry. It was about inconsistencies and narrative errors in World of Warcraft. Retcons, effectively. Now, both Catherine and Anne, effectively here, say that World of Warcraft is moving towards a POV storytelling tool, right? They're using point of view storytelling. I guess I should explain a little bit here. First, Catherine and Anne basically make it clear that they don't view any canon in World of Warcraft as actual canon. Instead, they view it pretty much always, where it makes sense, as this was from this perspective, and we're now going to show you a different perspective that may actually 100% contradict the original perspective. Now, how does storytelling work? It's very simple. You have two major ways of telling a story. The first is the narrative method or the tool. This is godlike storytelling. In other words, whoever tells you something, they are God, they're omnipresent, they're everywhere. You can believe everything that they have to say to you. The second big umbrella term is POV storytelling. This can be first person, third person, this can be, literally removed person telling. There's like a shit ton of tools around. I'm not going to bore you with all of the intricacies in the official lines about that, the definitions, so to speak. You didn't study this, you don't care. But those are the two big ones, right? You have the narrative one, which means that everything that is said is true and is canon. And then you have the point of view storytelling tool, which is a little bit different. Because basically, it boils down to everything is true, not everything is canon. That's what point of view storytelling is. It's sort of what Warhammer 40k is. It's what Warhammer Fantasy is. Everything is true, not everything is canon. Because every single story in Warhammer, I've read quite a number of books, as you can see here, from the Warhammer universe already. Every single one of these books are told very specifically from someone's point of view. So it will be a captain in the guard, or it will be a primarch, or it will be an adeptus custodes, or it will be an inquisitor. But it's told from this person's perspective, and you only see things from this person's perspective. As soon as the person escapes a specific situation, all of the information from that situation goes away because the person is no longer there to tell you what is actually happening. There's this one brilliant part in one of the Bequin novels. Is it Pariah? I think it's Pariah. Yeah, Pariah. In the Pariah novel, where Bequin she runs away from, I won't spoil it for those of you that haven't read it yet, but she runs away from a specific school, shall we say. The school is under attack, she runs away, and at that moment, she has no idea what the fate is of any of the characters of the school. She doesn't know whether they're alive, dead, being tortured, whatever it is. She's not there. She doesn't know. She also doesn't know who attacked them because she didn't have time to actually see. She has no idea. And that's the way the narrative works. It doesn't tell you. There is no narrative telling you what to do. Narrator telling you what to do or what is actually going on. That's point of view storytelling. The other, of course, self-explanatory. You don't really need me to explain it to you. Which one of these two works the best? That's basically what this boils down to. When you go on Twitter and you look at what people are saying, they're very, very angry, including Noble. I specifically disagreed with Noble's take here. Not with his whole take. I disagreed with one of his takes. A lot of people love to say that point of view narration cannot work because it basically means that the audience cannot trust anything that they read, and it just makes it so that the universe isn't consistent. That is only true in the sense of World of Warcraft and the way that the narrators in World of Warcraft or the writers in World of Warcraft write the story. You see, point of view storytelling, what's very important is that the reader must always know that they are reading a point of view. So often in World of Warcraft, that is not made known to the player base. So often in World of Warcraft, they treat it as if it is canon. So for example, if I were to ask you guys, what happened to Arthas at the end of Shadowlands? All of you will say he got turned into 35 anima and then disrespected by Sylvanas. That's what all of you will say. And we all believe that to be 100% canonically true. Now, is it possible that in 5 or 6 years, Blizzard brings Arthas back, and it turns out that the story we saw wasn't actually the story we saw? What we saw was simply those that were present telling us the story that they wanted us to hear. So we didn't actually physically see what happened to Arthas. They could do that. So we were basically seeing a cinematic with someone telling us what transpired rather than us seeing what transpired. It's certainly possible. They could do that. That would create massive problems within the reader's mind because you sold it to me as canonical. You sold it to me as if I was there. I saw what happened. But now you're rug pulling. You're changing the story. That's something that Blizzard does often. The most recent example of this is the Chronicles. So when the Chronicles first came out, I was among the first. I believe it was Pyromancer and me. We were among the first disciples that said, this is absolutely not canon. This has to be written from the perspective of the Titans because it's just filled with Titan propaganda. The problem was that Blizzard sold it as the word of God. They even said as much. This is the canonical version of World of Warcraft history. I believe if you go on Amazon, it literally still says that. And then they turned it around and said, oh, no, it's just from the perspective of the Titans. You don't have to believe a word that's in there. You see, this creates that problem for the player base. Wait, what? Why am I, what? Like, I need to know from the start that what you're telling me is a POV. If you can do that, that's perfectly fine, but it needs to be known. It needs to be well presented. It cannot be this sort of in-between, is this, isn't it, sort of thing. Unless it's obvious, you're gonna continuously have the player base cry out in anger because you're retconning things, even though you, in your own mind, don't think that you are retconning things. And the way Catherine and Anne answers it here, it really comes across as them just having zero respect for the intelligence of the player base. They seem to be having fun. You know, they're in their wild goal arc right now, you know, and they're just changing things all over the place. And, you know, Anne even says there, if one of the quest designers comes up to her with an interesting quest, but it conflicts with the game, they just change it. Right? Fuck it. We'll just change that. We'll change it in post. It's fine. right? They just changed it and sort of go, the point of view, right? That's really bad. That's like really, really bad. That's like such a no-no in storytelling. You cannot have that. Yeah, that's my thoughts, boys. That's the interview. That's literally the interview. All in all, it's fine. You know, it's good to see a little bit of insight from the developers. It's always fun to sort of read into this stuff and get a bit of a perspective on it. But yeah, it is weird. I would say it's somewhat problematic, but fuck it. I'm going to stop wasting your times. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe over on Patreon. $1 a month keeps this channel free from sponsorships. As always, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.